Greetings, mind crafters, and welcome to another exciting Minecraft discussion on this glorious day. I'm out here doing this in the evening, which is usually not my shtick. I'm usually a morning person, but uh, yeah. So and the sun is beautiful, and it's an August day. And anyway, here we go. So, really, what I wanted to talk about today was a continuation. 'Cause, we were talking last time about Greg McGowan's book Effortless. I cannot encourage you to read this more. His first one was Essentialism, second one Effortless, and again, I'm in this group of amazing masterminds, and they all swear up, down, and sideways by both of these books. And so, really, it's about debunking that whole thing of we have to kill ourselves to be successful. We're not saying be lazy daisies either. That's not it. But the old, false news about, you've got to work three jobs and, leave later than your boss, you're not important, and all that stuff is all, we're trying to bust through those myths. And anyway, so we were talking about some of this last time and about how slow and steady wins the race. That is what we're sticking with now. And what I want to do is talk about the pace. I want to talk about the pace because this is super, super important. And, Greg starts out with basically a story about how in the 20th century there was this big race to reach, the South Pole. And, that no one else had done it. Not um, Pythias, in the BC era, nor the Vikings, nor the Brits when they were in their, golden years at the Great British Empire. Nobody had done it. And so it came down to I think it was like around early 1900s, 1911, something like that. And the rivals for the pole was between two people. One of them was the Captain Scott, and the other one was, he was from Great Britain, and the other one was uh, Roald Amundsen of Norway. And so, in the shortened form of this, Captain Scott had a whole different routine, which is like this is what we're talking about right here. Captain Scott had this when the weather is good, bust our tails and just blow through, and he wore the men out to like they could hardly even go another inch because of the weather situation. He had to work when the weather was good, and then you kind of they killed themselves and they tried to rest when it weather wasn't good. Well, Captain Amundsen from Norway had a whole different theory on this, which is kind of Greg McGowan's whole point. No matter what the weather was doing, I believe it was a 15-mile cap he put on it. Whether the weather was good or not good, obviously it was incapacitating. They probably stopped. But if it was just regular bad weather, he had this thing where he didn't. They did 15 miles, but didn't outdo themselves. I think it was 15 miles. The whole thing was a 1,500-mile race, which was crazy. And so, okay, so I just had to double check my notes so I don't give any false news here. We don't want to do that. So yeah, so there was a difference between the two captains or the two men, whatever, the leaders. Scott was just like kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself when the weather was when they were able to trudge through on their way to the South Pole. And Roald Amundsen of Norway had a 15-mile cap no matter what the weather, even if it was good weather and the men were feeling great and could still go another 2 or 5 miles. He said, no, rest up, and because slow and steady wins the race. And so that's the whole thing. And he really stuck with it. He said, that's absolutely it. So they got up to like, they had like 3 days to go, I believe. They were within 3 days, and the weather was decent. And he still stuck to it. So the long and the short of the story is among Amundsen's guy from Norway, his team made it to the South Pole, and Captain Scott's team died. And so that's sort of the main theme of the story is that this what Greg talks about, the false economy of powering through. I'll just call it false news because we've been so conditioned, especially in the States, and I love my country dearly. We've been conditioned that we've got to. Again, I'm not a proponent or an advocate or supporter or whatever of being lazy daisies either. There's a healthy middle is the point. And it's not, powering through and killing ourselves, working three jobs and having no life, no time with family, no time in bad, end up in bad health and everything else. is just not worth it. It's not what it's about. And our life minutes on this day are important. And so the slow and steady wins the race thing is one of the themes of effortless. And this is kind of an extreme story, but the proof's in the pudding that Roald Amundson's from Norway guy. Anyway, his team made it, and Captain Scott's team all died. So there you have it. Okay, so right here is kind of why I wanted to have this conversation. I think because, as I mentioned in a bunch of episodes, the universe, these podcasts just come to me, and sometimes I'm not usually super planned. Sometimes I have a plan, and sometimes the universe just speaks to me because it's something that I'm already kind of like in or doing. And I've got a couple of passion projects going on right now that are really, really picking up and rapidly becoming successful. And I think I wanted to have this conversation because I feel like the conversations that we have in these podcasts are ultra authentic. They're always authentic because I'm authentic. But they're ultra authentic when it's something that I'm in right now and can really speak from the heart. And that's the case here because Greg McCowan talks about the upside of upper bounds, like having an upper bound and like a lower bound. And so the example with the two gentlemen racing to the South Pole, one having a slow and steady plan, and one having a push it, crazy, aggressive plan, and one making it with the slow and steady route, and one all dying, is really a good example. Kind of extreme, but a really good example. So Greg then feeds that example into more everyday, less extreme examples of trying to write a book or trying to run a 5K or a 10K. I'm also a runner. Currently, my foot's wrapped up because I just had a medical procedure, but I'm a runner that's taking a little break. Also a skier. But he has this, and this has been hard for me to digest because if I'm being totally honest, which I am, I'm not sure. Even though like the Norway guy made it, prior to reading that and having that knowledge, I'm not sure that would have been my strategy because it's more my nature, my personality. I'm thinking like with writing, with any of the projects I'm on, if I'm feeling good and I'm inspired, I just run with it. I mean, I can start out in the morning and I'm feeling good, all of a sudden it gets dark and I'm like, where'd that time go? And Greg McGowan's message is to not do that because it's actually better for motivation to have a low range and a high range and not to exceed it, even if you're feeling good. And quite honestly, I'm admitting it. That's hard for me because I've written 3 books. I'm actually working on my 4th right now. And the other 3 were ages ago. So I feel like I'm kind of starting over in a sense, I guess. But that's how I did it with the first 3. And now I'm really kind of adopting his principle here because I it seems like it's a good one. And so an example would be if you're trying to write a book, and you can fill in the blank with a gazillion different examples, but write I think he says write a minimum of 500 words each day. Get up early in the morning. That's what I do. I get up early in the morning. It doesn't have to be that, but to me, the day gets away if you wait. 500 words is not even like a college essay. That's super short. Um, and then not more than 1,000 words. And so that's the part that would be hard for me. I'm feeling in the zone. I have all these ideas. And what do you mean? I got to shut it off now. That's a faucet I don't want to shut off. So that's the thing I'm kind of working on. But his theory has worked well for him and lots of other people because it keeps the motivation going. It keeps you excited. Like you ended when you were still in the zone, and now you're that much excited to get back to it. And in the long run, on those days when you only have time for 500 words because your boss asked you to be there early for the meeting or whatever, it all balances out. You have the 500 words days and the 1,000 words day, and in the end, after a year, you wrote the book, or a year and a half. And then he's got some other examples, and I'm really adopting this right now, again, which is why I really wanted to have a talk with you about it, because I've got a couple of